Welcome to One Man's Tracks, the second-hand music channel. This week I learned about the tumultuous history of a legendary British rock band called the Stone Roses, their controversies, the mishaps navigating through the music industry, and just the sullied potential of what might have been for a band that was seemingly set to be one of the biggest of their generation. A few years of bands and personnel changes would lead Ian Brown and John Squire down their road to rock and roll stardom, starting in 1980 with a short-lived Clash-inspired band called The Patrol, joined by Andy Cousins and Simon Wollstonecroft. Ian spent some time being a rowdy scooter hooligan, eventually rejoining Squire and Cousins with a band called The Waterfront, led by Dave Carty. At their last gig, he got to sing lead vocal, and that sort of eventually led to what would become the Stone Roses when they'd add in Alan Wren on drums. The multi-talented Rennie would kind of solidify the first Stone Roses lineup, and they would play their first gig in October of 1984, supporting Pete Townsend. With that lineup, they'd gig and release a few singles through the mid to late 80s, up until a near-violent altercation between their manager Chris Evans and Andy Cousins led to Cousins leaving the group, and eventually a tip from Inspiral Carpet's main man Clint Boone led to the band acquiring bassist Manny, Gary Moundfield. The complete lineup was finally together by late 87, and by 88 they were signed to release their first album to Silvertone Records, a deal that would come back to haunt them, but would allow that eponymous debut to come out finally in May of 1989. By that point, their crossover rock sound had amassed quite a large local following, and the reception of that record, while slow at first, would lead to it being a tone-setting project for an entire generation of indie and alternative rock musicians out of the UK and even beyond. Their ability to pull this 60s psych pop, blend it with a 70s swagger, take it into the 80s and beyond is a truly remarkable feat, and that album has been consistently lauded as one of the greatest albums to ever come out of the UK. And with the sales of that record exceeding 4 million, I've somehow still yet to find a used copy during my hunt, and luckily, I stumbled upon the next best thing, their only other LP that came over 5 years after that debut due to that contract with Silvertone, I believe being an 8-record deal. It went to lawsuit, an injunction followed, some managerial disputes, some people close to the band passing away during this time, I'm sure among other things, but eventually they would get through it, sign with Geffen Records, get a couple $1,000,000 thrown at them to make that highly anticipated second album. This is that record, produced by Simon Dawson and Paul Schroeder, released in December of 1994. This is the Stone Roses' Second Coming. It's probably a blessing that I lack the context that led to this record being a major disappointment, because even though I can tell there are some half-baked or overindulgent songs here and there, and some of the moody lyrics are pretty uninspired, I still get quite a bit of enjoyment out of this and find it delivers on a lot of the same stuff that debut did. The playing is super impressive, the combinations are inspired, and Ian's surly, cocksure attitude is engaging, as disengaged as he can sound at times. I find it a little refreshing, honestly, as a self-professed lover of the opposite end of that indie dance scene at the time, that Manchester music. It's a band with a lot of what-ifs in its past, and that might have overinflated some people's perception of how great they should have or could have been, and that might have been what led to this album getting such an unfair shake. Around these parts, I tend to sincerely value the filters of time and generosity and the opportunity that allows for this non-judgmental and accessible discovery, and so maybe my fresh perspective here can help you to see this album through new eyes, get a little more enjoyment out of it, or even just try it out in the first place if you never got around to it due to the negative reputation. For me, these songs, the groove, the atmosphere they create are what compel me to keep giving the Roses another spin. Rennie and Manny's chemistry, keeping Ian's droning grounded, Rennie and Squire's just competence and flow vitalizing these songs into memorable rock jams. It might not sound entirely contemporary any longer, but I'll still give this album a ton of credit for, at points, ambiguously sounding somewhere in between 1965 and 2005, with the occasional 90s tonal and production giveaway. It is a bloated project at almost 80 minutes long, and that can be daunting for a curious new fan, I understand. Perhaps it was the knowledge that it was their final release that led to some of those indulgencies. Maybe it's just arrogance and ego. It could be the fact that they just wanted to keep pushing the limits of combining psych rock with punk, and that might be what ends up being these drawn out jams that, if you pushed even further, might just turn into ambient music. But I'm digressing. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take some time now, go into this album, pick out some more approachable cuts, but really talk about the whole thing going top to bottom. So it's not approachable from the get-go. I'd honestly recommend, if you're first jumping in, to maybe jump into the fourth track to get started, but the way I jump into albums, I go right from the top, and it's an over 11-minute opening track. It's an epic called Breaking Into Heaven, and that's where I'm going to be jumping into this, because that's where it starts. There is a lot going on in this one, from the similarly ambient psych rock intro from their debut that you hear tickles from, this kind of similar start to I Want to Be Adored. It's actually produced and recorded by the same producer that did that debut, John Leckie. He comes in, stretches out this ambience for a couple minutes, then it turns into like this tribal bongo with the jungle ambience, some bug and bird noises creeping in here and there. Finally, Manny provides this easygoing bass line that builds up into a nice harmonic pop chorus led in by John's classic rock riffs that he blends into his own melodies on this surly psychedelic rock number. Then we get to the darker hard rock throwback Southern Americana guitar sounds of Driving South. It even has a twinge of glam rock here, and it's an odd combination, but I think it sort of works. It's self-aware, and it creates a real image of driving south to go make a deal with the devil. Following up, there's a sweet sentiment behind the track 10-Story Love Song. It's this album's second single, and I might be just a little cynical, but it's too daydreamy for my tastes. I feel like it is a middling ballad that's trying really hard to punch above its weight class, and Ian's vocal range just doesn't do it here. Now we really get into the meat of the record here, with the next 5 or so tracks doing so well to highlight the band's vision and mastery, with the first being Daybreak. It is a funky, punky, upbeat sort of 60s psych rock vibe to it that is just fantastic all around. Maybe the outro jams on a little too long, but it does nicely lead into the proggy Simon and Garfunkel type tune that's called Your Star Will Shine. Where that song might lack a little in lyrical prowess, it does make up for it with this cool atmospheric haziness. In both cases there, those songs do so well to really modernize their influences. Then we're on to a pair of tracks that push the rock envelope further forward, with Straight to the Man giving me Beck vibes, sort of a la Garo, and then the third single here, Begging You, being an alternative atmospheric rock track that feels like something right out of Tom York's playbook. The best arc on this album comes from my favorite track, Tightrope. It is a bit of a slow starter, but it's easily the most gratifying and worthwhile intro on the project. It gives me some early Damon Albarn vibes this time, and it just nails that feeling of walking down a thin line, and it just builds with these layered, rounded vocals at the end that provide such a fulfilling finish to it as well. Going back to the past with an homage to the Doors on the track Good Times, and then some seriously Zeppelin, Rush riffs and breakdowns fill in the following song about human nature called Tears. They're both competently done tracks, but really unoriginal sounding, and I think Ian's kind of struggling to keep up with the band on Tears. Next, How Do You Sleep rolls in, asking simple questions about life on this celebratory beach rock cut that will sway you on to the finale. It is a song called Love Spreads, and it's the first single on the album. It is a great song, and they saved one of the best for last here. It is sort of a different perspective on the closer of that debut, I Am the Resurrection. It kind of pushes the camera towards this, I believe, African-American woman who they claim to be the godlike figure instead. It just does so well, combining those twangy tones of Driving South with the excellent grooves of Tightrope and Daybreak to put this catchy blues rock number with a somewhat Born to Be Wild sensation to close out this LP. Let me put you in the picture, let me show you what I mean. The Messiah is my sister, ain't no king, man, she's my queen. Or I guess almost to the finish line. If you get to track 90, there is a 6-minute jangly bonus jam called The Fawz that they've snuck right in here. What a fun, groovy, kind of alternative indie rock project here. They do so much with so many fun different ideas. Sure, it's not all gonna work out, and there are some duds here and there on this track list, but probably discovering it late is my saving grace when it comes to this album. Upon release, it was doomed to just be crushed by expectations, and that was just compounded by the internal disputes and other struggles the band had to go to just get to the point of making this album. It would push the band beyond its breaking point, with Rennie being the first one to pull the plug just a few weeks before they went on tour for this record. He left the band, and about a year later, John Squire would follow suit, with the band officially dissolving in October of 1996. This self-professed best band ever has managed to certainly leave an impact, even with just 2 full-length LPs, both seemingly pretty timely and timeless in their own rights. It's music that longs for the past but has hope for the future and wants to help it move towards that. So this highly influential, hard to duplicate rock fusion has indeed helped to push the genre into new thought-provoking and inspiring heights. During that extended hiatus period, the Stone Roses members still managed to make some music, with Rennie forming a short-lived group called The Rub, where he was actually frontman, guitarist, and bassist, and not the drummer at all. Manny played bass for Primal Scream. John Squire formed a group called The Seahorses. They put out an album, and he also released a pair of solo albums. The man is also an artist. He made this collage here, some artwork for the other Stone Roses projects, and I believe a pair of other albums he's helped out with during that hiatus period. Ian Brown has put out 7 solo albums since 1998, most recently with Ripples in 2019. They made their comeback in 2012, playing numerous sold-out shows and festivals, even released a pair of singles in 2016, but June 24th, 2017, in Glasgow, the band would play their final show. They're officially really done for real now, and if you want to check out a little documentary that was put together about that reunion tour, it's pretty nice. I've linked it down below, along with this and all the other music I've talked about for you to listen to on your own there. I'm looking forward to finding that debut and completing my Stone Roses collection, but in the meantime, I'd love for you to let me know your thoughts on this album. Is it as disappointing as you remember it? Have you heard of the Stone Roses before? Did you get to see them live with the Stone Roses or another band that they were a part of? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. If you haven't already, like the video and subscribe for a weekly dose of secondhand madness. I love it. Welcome if you're new. Thank you for watching if you've been here a while. I appreciate the heck out of you guys. I'm on a tightrope, baby. One thing I've found, I don't know how to stop, and it's a long, 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 long way down.